Our next panel will look at new roles in fund asset management. Sharing their insights will be Ms. Karen Wong, Vice President, Executive Recruitment, Talent Acquisition, APAC for BlackRock, and Ms. Fu Kai, Senior VP, Talent Acquisition for GIC. Moderating the discussion will be Ms. Eileen Chong from Career Advisory at IBF. The audience is reminded to post their questions in the Q&A box. Over to you, Eileen.
Thanks, Florence. Hi, everyone. Very warm welcome to all of you. So I hope everyone's having a good afternoon today. With me on the panel, we've got Karen. Hi, Karen. And Kai. Hi. And to start off, I'm going to get each of you, Kai and Karen, to give a short self-introduction about yourself so that we can, the audience can ask more questions later.
Sure, Eileen, would you like me to start first?
Okay.
All right, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Very well.
Okay, very good. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. I'm actually currently the VP here in BlackRock as part of the Executive Talent Acquisition team. So I do cover positions across the region besides Singapore. Primarily, my focus would be on technology, as well as corporate functions, as well as some areas in investment management on the alternative side. That will be my portfolio here. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Over to you, Kai.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Very glad to be here. My name is Fu Kai. I'm from GIC. I'm with the talent acquisition team. And I have over 20 years of experience in HR, primarily with the talent acquisition function. So currently, I partner with our business leaders in the investment businesses, as well as some of the corporate functions, whenever they have talent needs on their team.
Right. Thanks, Kai. And so while waiting for questions from the audience to come in, I will get each of you to share in turn about the opportunities and skill sets in demand that you see within your sector. So Kai?
Yeah, so we are in the investment management business, asset management business, and we are one of the biggest multi-asset managers. Now, in terms of some of the what's interesting or what's creating lots of that opportunity for people that we see are the use of technology, the use of data in our business. How can we leverage that to extract the insights that can help us to move forward the business? So I think with that you can see from our job postings, quite a number of our opportunities are related in those fields as well.
Perhaps I can add as well, and I second what was just mentioned. A lot of our positions here across some of the key roles that we have been hiring would be looking at specific skill sets that would allow an individual to know how to manage data and information. I think that is primarily a skill that is rolling across many of our positions that we have, whether you're in compliance, to investments, to technology, or to data, or to operations. I think more and more important is how do we dissect information and make use of this information. It's becoming more and more important across all the roles that we have. So I think a common skill set that you will see in some of the job descriptions that would come up would be, for example, SQL and Python skills are starting to be very, very common skill sets that we have. So in terms of positions, we do also in fact, we are hiring quite a number of positions in the technology space. Some of the positions within the investment space are looking at platforms as well. So that would mean having prior knowledge in technology, financial technology, on dealing with data on the technology platform. And I think the other key pieces that would be opportunities that will come up and also constantly come up would be in compliance. I think that's always a hot topic, and that's always an area that is always been in demand. But what we notice actually in the compliance space that's starting to become more interesting is the need for, once again, data. For example, dissecting information that comes up over and over again that would require the need for a second eye or third eye when it comes to regulatory sort of scrutiny. So yeah, so that would be something I would add. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. So a very common question that we on the ground, operating a career center get, right, is that for individuals who are already in those functions, in those roles, where do you see them, getting a handle on all these? How can these individuals who are already in these roles, for example, in compliance, upskill themselves to better prepare themselves for the new and evolving roles that both of you have just mentioned?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a step at this and start the ball rolling, right? So I think, for those who are already in compliance, I think that's great because that's an area where there's demand. It's now within that area, it's also a broad area, right? So I guess, one way to kind of get a handle on it and think about it is, what sort of tool sets do I need in order to leverage my knowledge of compliance? So, increasingly, it's not so much about how much you know about a topic, but what sort of insights are you able to extract from that topic? So, to add on to what Karen was mentioning earlier on, right? I mean, we see a lot of demand for Python, for SQL. Now, I want to add on to that to say that, Python and SQL may be what's in flavor right now, right? But it doesn't mean that it's going to be the tools of choice 2 years down the road, for example. So I think there's also that constant, need to, continuing, that ability to say, okay, what is the other new tool set? What is the other new tools that are available on the market that can allow me to extract even more insights to be of value or service to the business? And kind of getting yourself in the right place, in the right space, and having the skill sets to apply that.
No, absolutely. I agree with Kai as well. One of the, if I was to take an example of, say, the hot topic right now in data privacy and group protection, I think that's a flavor of the season, right, in terms of it. What I notice a lot of candidates sometimes do, even if they don't come from that environment, is to take up a certification and use that as a platform to show the keen interest in this particular topic and how they can, progress further in this field because of that dedicated effort and time spent in it. So I think really understanding which area of interest you have and researching and understanding a little bit more about what of these organizations are looking for, stepping ahead and looking ahead, and think, is there any other are there courses out there that you should be taking that could give you an additional ammunition in an opportunity for conversations when you have a chance for an interview. I think that's important.
Thank you. That was very useful. So I heard from Kai, right, that in talking about Python, SQL, which is the hot thing right now, the mindset actually comes before the tool set. Right, so it is this mindset that many people are grappling with, and so I would like to hear from both of you once again on what kind of mindset have you seen within your circle of people that you work with that makes them succeed in this current climate.
Yeah, and happy to share my thoughts on that, right? I think just to kind of deepen the point I brought up earlier on, maybe one way to think about it is tools won't stay the same, right? Tools won't stay the same. So maybe it's useful to think about, you're not bringing your tool set, but you're bringing a certain mindset. And what's in this mindset would be things like, always seeking for insights and not so much knowledge. Knowledge should be at the service of insights, right? And how do you get yourself in the mind frame also, like kind of being very curious about, hey, there's this new development. What's the driver behind it? And where is this going to take us to, right? And also leveraging on, the sort of experience I've had, maybe in this field, maybe in other fields. What can I leverage from there that I can, contribute to the conversation that's happening right
now? Yeah, I was about to think of the word being inquisitive as well. I think that's what Kai brought out. An example of I had a very good encounter with a candidate whom I'd like to share as an example of this, where this individual actually came from a completely different environment as well as industry. But what struck me that this individual was so hungry to get into the industry was the inquisitiveness of and the curiosity around the industry, about the organization, that they research very thoroughly and into the depths of the company, and also understand who in the company they can talk to, the network they can reach out to, and who in their current network may know the network in the industry that could help them bridge the gap. So I think once again, it starts from that curiosity. If you are very hungry and you're curious, go beyond what is your usual comfort zone. Talk to people out there and find out whether are there any avenues of information you can get from these individuals that you might not actually have thought about, because that might sometimes give you a little bit more color and cover your blind sides that you might actually have.
Thanks, Kai and Karen. I really like what both of you have said, right? So something that sticks with me from what Kai mentioned just now is really insights above knowledge. And I think that is so important in today's age where everyone's talking about AI, but really insights come only from, come out of a place of experience and like what Karen mentioned, curiosity, that hunger and all that, right? And very nice to note, we do have our first question from the audience. Okay, I'm going to try to read it out. We have a person who's anonymous. He or she was previously doing content management for an asset management company, and having left that role since, the person has not been able to land another role. So this person is now doing content marketing and comms and works in the technology space. So, you know, the question is, how receptive are recruiters to people like that, you know, who have come from asset management space, previously doing something like content management, and now because they aren't able to get back in, they are now doing content marketing and comms. Admittedly, a step further. Yeah, would you have any advice for people like that?
Yeah, so I can start the ball rolling. Now, I think, you know, again, on the theme of, you know, what can you leverage, you know, and what you need to, you know, add on, right? So, and you find that I'll keep coming back to this theme, you know, time and over again, because, you know, regardless of whether, you know, we are displaced or we choose to pivot our career into different directions, I think, you know, personally, I think that it's important to note that we are not throwing anything away, right? We all come with valuable experience that we can leverage for our future path. So in this particular case, this individual, you know, has a lot of good understanding of the context of how an asset management firm works. Now, that is valuable, right? So then what is that missing piece would possibly be, you know, in the desired domain, you know, what's happening in that domain that, you know, would, you know, enable this person to play to his or her strengths, right? And the other theme, I think, is, you know, a lot of different domains, a lot of different functions in our industry, as well as other industries, are undergoing a lot of change, right? There's a lot of impact, there's a lot of change. So I think there's also that, you know, Eileen asked about mindset earlier on. I think, you know, part of that mindset kit that we bring around really is also about, you know, how can we constantly kind of keep in mind to, you know, learn, relearn, unlearn, because it's going to be that constant cycle. We are never going to be there in terms of like, okay, I've got all the skill sets or all the toolkits I need, because it's never going to be static.
And I think one thing is also to not necessarily downplay your current role and the industry that you're in, because I think this person mentioned they're in tech, and that obviously is a buzzword for many people. I think this question is, how do you bring the value of your current role sometimes in context with your previous role and put it at a certain level, feel that you are stronger, better, you have a 360 view of certain things that could add into the role itself. I think it's always to try to put your, try to think about the role from a very big picture perspective, understand yourself from that and see how you can best match. Bring the transferability, I think, to what Kai was saying, into something that is relevant to the role and pitch it that way. I think at the end of the day, it's always making sure that you're putting in your position in a way relevant to that position, to the role on hand, and think about it a little bit more from the other person's perspective, because they might want profiles that are a little bit different from the usual candidates who may come from a mainstream asset management. The question to you is, how would you not know that they want somebody with alternative experience, right? So maybe they have that as a mindset and say that if, let's say, this individual would like to have a diverse candidate with a different perspective, how do I position myself? How do I draw a resume of myself to make myself look more attractive, coming with diverse views? And maybe put that in your cover letter and pitch it that way. So that could give a different angle to your current role. So I take it as an advantage rather than anything else, to be honest.
Thanks, Kai. Thanks, Karen. I like both of what you said. So the other thing that sticks with me is leverage, and the second part is about really influence and how do you make yourself stand out. Something that to encourage our candidates is that sometimes something that they think is a disadvantage might actually turn out to be an advantage. So and we've got a new question this time. This is around the same theme of pivoting. So we, for example, what kind of advice would you offer to someone, say, who is interested in a compliance role, but the person does not come with experience in compliance itself? And I think the broader theme is what advice would you offer to someone who does not necessarily have that functional or domain experience to pivot into a new role, a new function, as well as a new domain?
I can take that first, since Kai always also take up the question. I can take this one first.
Thank you.
I guess
Thank you, Karen.
No, that's all right. I guess sometimes an easier way is really to go in first based on the current role that you have. I think sometimes it's to think a little bit more about, okay, I understand compliance could be something that you're interested in. And if your current experience is completely 360 degrees away from compliance, then the question is what skills and transferable skills that you have that will match this industry? And is there a possibility of you jumping into a role where it's much closer fit to your current skill and then move internally thereafter? Right? So that's one way of looking at it. It might really be a longer journey, but sometimes you might have to take a longer journey to reach your goal than to do a shortcut, and you might not necessarily get the right road at the right pace. And sometimes going through that path may actually give you a better overview of the organization, the different structures, that may actually put you at a better position to be a stronger compliance person than jumping straight in without any experience. So the beauty of going through a long route is that you gain, as a stone going through a hill, garnering a moss, right? You actually gain other experiences that maybe puts you in a better position. And you get time as well to start thinking about certifications, picking up different kinds of regulatory knowledge as you go through those roles, to put you in a better position to be a compliance person. So that's coming from a completely non-relevant experience. Now, if let's say you do have some relevant experience, whether it's audit, I know I'm just taking a guess here. I know a lot of people from audit eventually also move into compliance space through some form or another. Legal, I mean, that's a very natural sort of sometimes bridge into compliance. Or maybe sometimes even just having transferable knowledge from a data perspective, because I noticed, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes nowadays compliance are looking for people with number crunching skills, or even cybersecurity, to some extent, because there's some level of relevance. Then I think the question is, does that organization team structure have space, scope, room for someone with your skill set? And I think it's understanding and doing research and understanding a little bit more about some of these organizations and the kind of space that they come from, and how do you sort of position yourself or pivot yourself into a place where your current skill set can fit into the organization. Sometimes it's not just a role. Sometimes you have to look at the whole entire structure of the team to get there. And of course, the question is, how do I even get into that conversation? To begin with, networking. I think that will have to be one of the opportunities, to find a way to get yourself a foot in the door, a network, or talk to agents. Talk to recruitment agents who may know the industry, and they might give you a tip or two around a little bit more about the structure of the firm that you might be interested in. Yeah.
I must say that I agree with what Karen said, and to add on to some of the points, right? Couple of points. One is, I think, there's also this element of not just looking at skill sets, but breaking it down into competencies, right? So for example, you may not have this particular skill set for you to pivot into compliance, but do you have a particular competency that is highly valued in compliance? So for example, do you have that superhuman ability, to be super thorough and detailed? You spot something which nobody can spot. And you've proven this in your current job or in your previous, experiences. Now, that is something that's very valuable that a potential hiring manager in compliance would be looking out for. So how can you then share that about yourself, right? You may not have, the skill set, but you have this competency. So I think that's one thing. The other thing also, when looking at people pivoting to a different area, I think, in a hiring manager's shoes, the one question on the mind that you always think about is, hey, let's say, I give you the benefit of the doubt, right? And, willing to, provide that training opportunity and all that. How do I know that you're going to, stay the course, right? So I think, that to build on the point that Karen mentioned earlier on, when you're networking, don't just learn about what's so attractive about this role, but understand the 360-degree view of this role, right? What's and all, what could be potential challenges. And hence, you are making a very considered decision. And that sort of consideration you bring to your pursuit of this new pivot to a new career is going to come true, right? When you speak to hiring managers. And I think that is valuable to hiring manager. It gives them comfort that, okay, you have done your homework, you have weighed the pros and the cons, right? It's not just the good stuff about this role or this industry, but you understand, what could potentially be the challenges, and you have a plan on how you can manage these challenges or tackle them, right? And the third point I wanted to contribute is the point about diversity, right? Well, yes, you don't have the current skill set, you don't come from the current industry, but what can you bring, that is potentially of value add to the hiring manager? I think, we can recognize our strengths and we celebrate this. And, if you have networked, if you've done your homework, you've spoken to people in this industry, what, this industry is like, the domain, if you've researched it, chances are you will have some thoughts about, how you can add value given your current role or your past experiences. And that would be, very interesting to the hiring managers.
Thanks, ladies. I really like the way that both your sharing are building on each other's themes, right? So, when we talk about pivoting, Karen mentioned about networking. I mean, networking is so important. And indeed, from a career center perspective, where the success stories that we have seen in people who manage to actually pivot is really, it is not about what they showed on their resumes, but it was really through a series of networking and, being at the right place at the right time. Yeah, and the other thing that that comes across very clearly is, what Kai mentioned just now about leverage, and then Karen built up on it about adjacency. It is really about, pivoting is not a one step. You don't get to that destination in one step. But when we are trying to pivot to something very, very far away, we are talking about step-by-step adjacency and making small moves. And even then, the people who do succeed in our experience have only done so by extensive networking. I think that point cannot be overstated.
Yeah, so Eileen, just to build on your point, right? I think maybe one way to potentially frame it, since I'm from the asset management industry, yes. We think about risk and returns, right?
Yeah.
So one way to frame it is really, a hiring manager, when they're looking at a pivoting hopeful, is really wanting to bring in talent, but at the same time trying to manage the downside risk, right?
Yeah.
So those elements that we discussed earlier on about, what can you demonstrate, to show the hiring team that you are serious about this opportunity, right? You've done your homework, all that stuff, right? That is going to give the hiring manager more comfort, right, in managing the outside risk that, hey, this person is going to find that, well, it's not suitable after a while.
So once again, thank you for that, Kai. That was very useful, because I think once again, the thing is does tie back to mindset. And it's about how the candidate takes it upon himself or herself to show that, hey, look, my alternative experience, is a diversity. I mean, it's a diversity thing, and it is an asset to me and to you as well. And not so much, okay, what am I going to do to address the gap? Right. Okay. So, and I have got, let's see whether we've got more questions coming in now. I wonder if this would be a good place to address, so far we've talked about people, who are trying to pivot into the asset management industry from from totally no domain or functional experience. But how about from other verticals within the banking and finance sector? Would you have any advice for them?
So sorry, so you're referring to cross-functional transfers in that sense, right?
Yeah. So just now we were discussing about people who totally have no background in asset management, say for example, no background in compliance, right? But how about someone who does have some experience in asset management and is trying to pivot in, or someone who doesn't even comes from banking but does not come from asset management? Would you have any advice for these groups of people?
I guess I think it's to find the vertical that best fit. I think that always makes it easier. But I think Kai also mentioned quite a lot of very salient points around, finding the sweet spot. And when you're doing the research piece, right, how do you bring your diverse backgrounds into the foray of the vertical? I think it's key. There are actually several positions within the asset management space which technically can come from many different industries. It doesn't have to be in the financial sector, but of course that's, for example, facilities management, right? Technology can come from pretty much across many different spectrums, especially in the infrastructure and the backend space. From HR, for example, is a highly transferable skill set that can cut across many different industries. Some of these verticals actually are highly transferable. I think the question is, are these functions areas of interest? I think that's number one. Is there a vertical that you see yourself bring that transferable skills that you have into this vertical? Do you fall into this vertical? I think those are questions you need to identify. And then I think the other important question is, why asset management? Because asset management actually is very, very large as well. Like the likes of a GIC and the likes of a BlackRock actually are quite different parts of asset management too, right? Kai can probably agree with me on that. So we sit on different parts of the spectrum of asset management. And then within the buy-side space, there's so many other players like hedge funds and private equities, insurance companies, which could bring you a different foray of different skill sets and background as well. So I think the question is, what do you identify as a skill set that you see yourself being able to bring to the table? How do you penetrate into that from the vertical perspective? And then look across the spectrum, right? And then identify a spectrum there where you can best fit. I think some of the success cases I see within the recent years that I've been looking at that we look at transferable skills. For example, data privacy is one that is highly transferable. You can come from any industry, right? Because the subject matter content is very, very similar across the board. So something like that would be quite, visible. Even audit, if it's IT audit, for example, potentially also could be quite transferable, because some of these types of functions or roles are transferable in any organization if it's very generic and that doesn't require the subject matter content in the marketplace. So that's kind of what I would say.
Thanks, Karen. It's very useful. Thank you both ladies for identifying very specific, I would call it entry points for people who are wanting to pivot into the asset management space. And now that we have talked a bit about pivoting specifics, right? It's time to zoom up, because there are a couple of questions we have about the industry. So I have a very interesting question from the panel. What are the similarities and differences between private equity, asset management, and family offices?
Okay, I'll take a stab at that. So I would say asset management generally looks at more long-term view of investments. In general, I think most of our products tend to be long-standing. So I understand private equity tend to be a lot more quick turnover in terms of the way they look at their investments. Family offices tend to be looking at family wealth and very specific to just one particular group. In this case, that particular family. And I think that's my high-level overview. I think asset management now can obviously be quite broad in terms of the different products that they tend to bring along. I think in short, what we do is we will manage our clients' money, in this case, on behalf of our clients as a fiduciary, right? portray and give them options, right, of all the different products that we can potentially offer to them across the different baskets of asset classes, whether is it the plain vanilla, your equities, fixed income, or maybe alternative products that we potentially have. ETF products, in this case, also are alternative, additional products that we might have that could give the clients a diversified portfolio to look at depending on the kind of returns that they want to get and the risk that they have. So in general, I think asset management tend to have a long-term view of risk versus returns. Whereas my understanding of private equity is fairly more short-term. The risk is much higher, right? Returns also can be a lot higher as well. So I guess the way they run their funds or the way they run their portfolios is done a little bit differently because of the kind of returns they're trying to get vis-a-vis the risk that they have, right? That's my view, yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Karen has said, maybe just to layer on. So, all these are, I think, the question asking about similarity differences, I think all these are players, in this space, right? And which Karen has articulated. I think the other factor to consider is, besides, whether this is a family office or, or a hedge fund or what have you, right? I think the other factor to consider is, regardless of what stripes or colors or whatever they come from, understand, okay, this family office or this fund, what is their area of focus, right? Be it, do they cover a certain region, geographical region, or do they have a more lean towards certain themes, right? So for example, if you're interested in opportunities with this particular fund, and this particular fund, say, has a very strong thematic lean on, say, ESG, then if you come from that background, that's something that you can bring to the table, when you're getting into a conversation with them. Another example would be, let's say you're interested in this particular family office, and their style of investing, maybe, it's very much, focusing on using a lot of, data-related methods, for example. Then if you come with those skill sets or competencies, then again, I think, you're going to have a very interesting conversation with them. So I would also suggest, layering on that understanding of, not just what's their size or, what sort of horizon they invest in, but also what is their particular focus in terms of geographical coverage, right? Because let's say if they have a focus on Greater China and you speak, 2 or 3 languages that allows you to operate well in that market, to relate well to people, then clearly that's also going to be your advantage.
Thank you. This has been very, very useful. I think, thank you both ladies for, helping our audience, really nail it down to specifics. Here's a question that's not related to asset management, but really directed at your advice from an HR talent acquisition perspective. So if a person is an introvert, what advice would you offer to someone like that who, for whom networking doesn't come so naturally?
I'm happy to take that. I think this is a very interesting topic, and sometimes in conversations and in seminars, it comes up quite a lot. To be honest, I say different strokes for different folks. It doesn't mean that you're an introvert. Networking should be a hurdle for you to cross, right? I think even if you're an extrovert, networking is also a hurdle for them to cross. So don't assume that all extroverts take networking or take it like a piece of cake, because I don't think so. I think everyone face networking the same sort of fear, and because there is a fear of an unknown, right? I think everyone will be on the same page. So be very relieved to know that you are not alone, right? In this case. So that's my number one suggestion, is to not necessarily categorize yourself accordingly, because that increases your view of what you think you can't do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is then think about what approaches comfort is more comfortable for you. Some people prefer to message through LinkedIn, for example, as a start, right? And why is that necessarily? It's not a bad way. It's a great way to do it, right? Personally, I receive many messages as well on my personal LinkedIn message to have that. Then, of course, there will be a separate conversation altogether. How do you write a proper message to a person to get the attention, right? And there are individuals who put in very mindful, thoughtful messages in LinkedIn that gets my attention. And then you have a one-on-one conversation, which may actually be more of your comfort zone, because you may not want to go into a big event and socialize in a big event. or a virtual event, which obviously that's where the landscape we are in, but maybe on the one-on-one setting that might do better for you. So think about an approach that you feel you're more comfortable with and start from there. And maybe from there you can gain your confidence to maybe step up a little bit more, to think about maybe other avenues, podiums, people that you may feel can help you value add in your understanding and conversations as you go along. I think you build your confidence along the way.
I think that's a great point that Karen mentioned, right? Essentially about picking the format that allows you to be most comfortable to be in your element. And this is irrespective of whether you're an introvert or extrovert or ambivert or somewhere in between, right? And I have a little bit of a story to share. So I was in a conversation with a very good friend the other day, and he told me that, you know what, this period actually, surprisingly, I've had a much better working relationship with my boss than I've ever had. I said, why is that? And he said, well, because I don't have to see him face to face right now. And, I'm in my best when I'm writing, because that's where I have a lot of clarity. And I'm not so good when I have to present. And then, sometimes I speak slower than I think, right? And so, not in my element. So I said, well, good for you. So, and I guess I'm sharing this story because, back to the point about picking the format that, allows you to be in your element, to be comfortable, right? And to get the most out of it. So in a sense, strangely enough, given the current times, a lot of things are virtual right now, are online. And, this can be a format that, people who consider themselves more introverted, that's something that you may be more comfortable with and you can leverage more.
Thank you, ladies. That was very encouraging. Yeah, for obvious reasons. And we do have another question now that is also very HR related rather than asset management related. So could you please share your views on online certifications such as MOOCs or even online master's degrees? What are hiring managers' perspectives on them?
Actually, I think they're excellent. I personally, I think many times where we see candidates who have taken courses, especially if they're relevant. I think Kai mentioned a little bit more about that earlier in a different topic where you zoom in on relevance, right? And I do have a story to tell on this based on what you just shared, because we were looking for candidates who have sort of relevance in the ESG sustainability sort of experience, right? And the individual actually took an online course, a master's program in that area, even though that was not her background. It was an area of interest. And it was a highlight on her resume. So I think that was something that got picked up, that this person is interested in this area because this is a buzzword. There's a big theme for asset managers these days, right? So it came up. So I would say that, you should go for any online course that is of interest to you, because it shows about, not necessarily about the course per se, it shows about your eagerness to learn and to grow. I think that's the number one thing I feel, you shouldn't say that an online course is not worth the time. In fact, now we are all on this online platform anyway. I think that the point is, which online platform makes more sense to you is what you should be thinking of, rather than don't take up an online course. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. So for Kai, would you have anything to share on that? Another story would be nice.
I totally agree with Karen, right? And again, I guess, this brings back to the theme of what gives the hiring manager comfort, right? So, in Karen's example, if I'm the hiring manager, right, and ESG is a very new area, I would be concerned about people pivoting, whether they truly understand what they're getting into. And if this person has actually taken the pain, invested their time and their effort when they can be doing many other things, right, to pursue this topic, now that gives me some measure of comfort that, okay, this person is putting their money where their mouth is.
Thank you. Oh, that's very useful. And I really like this. So it is not just about the action per se, but it is really about, what the action shows about the person behind that action, whichever part of the recruitment process the person is in. So we have got another two more questions that are seemingly related. So I have one question. So the first question is, does M&A experience in a Big Four accounting firm help one in pursuing a career, within your respective areas?
Absolutely.
Great. And then the second question that's related is this. So we have got someone who has got global markets background in market risk and counterparty risk. So are investment management firms open to consider someone from global markets?
I would definitely say yes. And with an add-on, right? That this person is able to add on the piece that is required for investment management firms, right? So I think the delta here is the maybe the types of products, the asset classes, and also maybe the processes are a little bit different. So, if one can identify what are the differences, and I think managers will narrow that gap. Because there are certainly very transferable skills and competencies.
Yeah, I agree. And I think risk actually is a very, I think it's a very niche skill that asset managers always look out for as well. And I think there's a question is how do you portray once again, the transferable skill in your role into a resume that strikes out to the hiring manager, that they can bring it to their role. So I think that's the part that most hiring managers will be looking out for. I would imagine the exposure in the asset classes that you have in the markets will be also very relevant. The question is how do you portray and how do you convey your story such that I can see the hiring manager and say, okay, these are some of the skills that I definitely need, and this person can bring me a diverse thought process into my team. So I think that's important. So it's important to understand the job description, portray your profile accordingly.
Thank you. Evidently, your very nice answers have generated more questions related to the same topic. So we've got someone with institutional equities experience mid-career. Is it possible to cross over into the asset management side? What kind of possible roles, can someone look out for?
Okay, I must say that I'm struggling a little bit with this question because it is rather broad, and I'm not quite sure how to address this question really, to be frank. But I mean, let me attempt. Broadly speaking, I think it's I mean, really, what is this individual, again, hoping to apply his or her skill sets in? So I do not know whether this person from institutional equities is this person on the, sales part of the business or other parts of the business, right? But I will go back again to the principles of what we have discussed, earlier on in the afternoon. It's about looking for transferability, ideally skill sets. If not, break that down into competencies, right? And then the other theme, of course, would be looking for, whichever part of that particular area you're in, what is that perspective you have that would make it very interesting, for the hiring manager on the new area that you're hoping to break into.
Thanks for that, Kai. That's useful given that the question was so broad. Okay, and then there's a add on to it. Institutional equity sales.
So I think if it's a sales role, I think the important part is you need to highlight who your market audience is as well, right? Because at the end of the day, if the product is transferable and that can be picked up, I think from a value add of sales is who are your clients? Are these clients that you feel that the other party could feel that, hey, you know what, I like your exposure, I like the people and the markets they are exposed to. Let's have a conversation to understand that. Because I think the role of a salesperson is a very flexible one. And at the end of the day, it's all about who you know out there in the market. So yeah, I don't see why not if there is that transferability there.
Thank you. So The next few questions, I'm going to choose questions that will apply to as large of our audience as possible, so that everybody gets to go away with something. And the next question that we'd like to talk about is, given that asset management firms are now increasingly more complex with various asset classes, private equity, investments in very different from public fixed income, do you see teams having very specific requirements in their hiring needs?
Let me take a stab at this question, right? So I would say both yes and no. Let me elaborate. Yes, because the observation is correct, right? Because there's this increasing depth. So for each of the asset class, you're going into more and more depth. So that's the yes part. At the same time, there's also a no part, right? Because there's a lot of value, and some of the bigger, multi-asset platforms are taking advantage of that, where you value people who are able to look at cross-asset opportunities. So in that sense, ability to go deep as well as to go broad. Now, ideally, we hope that, an individual has certain measures of that, but all of us are at different spectrum of that. So I think, to add on to the mix would also be the ability to play well in a team with others. So if you're somebody who is very strong at going deep, are you able to have the sort of mindset to be able to collaborate with others who can go across, and then together you have a winning combination?
I also want to add that there are also sorry, I'm not sure. I wanted to add also there are roles, there are very broad roles within each of some of these asset classes as well. Like, for example, business management, right? COO type roles, and operational type roles, due diligence, where they do a lot of the front end of it. So there are a lot of such positions within each of these asset classes that could potentially exist as well, where having a breadth of experiences may actually be a merit rather than, say, having a depth, especially in a business management type role within such a function, for example. So don't necessarily think of the verticals in that specialization. Think of some of the options that could leverage on some of these, sort of overview of experiences that you might potentially have.
Thank you for that, ladies. And now going back to our next question on this. Ready for a challenging question? Feel free to answer with a story, right? So we talked a lot about previously at the start of this session, right, about roles requiring data-related skills and insights over knowledge. So there are people. There is one question: are there new roles right now that require skill sets, and is it something that new entrants to the sector can aim for?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? Sorry.
So the question is, are there new roles coming up in fund and asset management right now? And are there skill sets, that people can pitch for? And this is targeted specifically for people who are trying to pivot in and trying to aim for the new roles.
Yeah, I would say, I think I might have mentioned this. I would say that some of the newer positions that we see out here would really come from a platform perspective. Once again, technology. Yes. And platform can actually take on many, many forms. So, for example, there could be opportunities that goes into, say, agile, right? If let's say you come from an industry where agile is something that you are very familiar with, that sometimes does not necessarily need to be industry specific if you are able to bring that experience into the role. So I think, I see more and more asset managers tapping onto the agile methodology in some of the different types of framework that they are in. So that could be one. For example, I'm just picking an example. For us, we are adopting the agile methodology in some of our functions. So that could be one area to look at. And I use the word platform also because I think I see more and more asset managers stepping up on their technology platform. So you will find that there will be more and more of such new positions coming up through time, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, where they may look for more project managers, where they may look for more people who are actually dealing with clients on the platform, whether it's client service from a platform perspective, dealing with some of the more middle operations on a platform perspective, right? And dealing with data, once again, a big buzzword when it comes to technology. So I think at the end of the day, understanding how financial technology works in asset management could be a very, I wouldn't say it's new, it's actually ongoing for a long time. Like even BlackRock, we are using Aladdin, and other asset managers are securing of such similar systems as well. So you start noticing asset managers are stepping up their game in platforms. I would say that would be definitely a key, one area of looking at it, and how each of these roles across some of these positions, whether is it very tech focused to a very client facing focus, to a end user management focus, to a design focus or marketing focus, could bring in many different kinds of skill sets into the role because of stepping up on the technology side in managing the way we handle our products.
Yeah, and to add on, totally agree. Quite a bit happening on the platforms angle. And I think, to add on to more specifics to that, I think, people with the experience or background in the cloud engineering, there is a demand. People with the sort of experience or even the interest, right, to want to step into cybersecurity. There is definitely, a lot of appetite, to consider people with those experience. And in fact, I think what's very interesting is if, hypothetically, if we have an individual who, used to be, say, an applications developer, right, and is now pursuing, certification in cybersecurity related area, this will be quite an interesting profile for an asset manager to consider.
Thank you, ladies, for that. That's useful. And let me see. Right, I've got two questions that are slightly related as well. And both of them are directed at fresh grads. So the first question is, given that asset management is so difficult to break into, what advice do you have for fresh grads? So we can take that first. And the second question that's coming from fresh grad is, do you have any advice for someone starting in their career that's non-tech, trying to pivot to a tech-based roles? So I suppose we could take the first one, which is, how does a fresh grad break into asset management?
Okay, I guess the easy one would be to look into the graduate programs. So I would imagine many asset managers will have graduate programs. So if you're already out of school, of course, that's another topic. Is then looking at some of the analyst level positions that are available across the board. I think it goes back to some of the things that we've mentioned earlier, is to research on the company in itself, to understand what kind of functions do they potentially have. Take a look at some of the openings that they potentially might have. Try to see whether you can speak to anybody who, what kind of positions that potentially comes up with. Because if you are very interested in that particular organization or a specific organization, and you're not sure exactly how do you penetrate in, you need to know exactly what kind of functions there are first. Because as a fresh grad, you are so new, you potentially are not so sure which area you want to go for, right? So you need to identify what you want to go for, which skill sets or which structure you want to go for, which function you go for, and then start zooming in over there and understand, do they have junior positions? Do they have analyst positions that I can go in? Can I participate in internships? Are there any industrial programs that potentially might come up? I think there's a lot coming up right now that I think IBF is very active on looking. I mean, can I participate in any of these trainingships that I can step in to get my foot in the door? I think those are, I would say, the best way to step in as a fresh grad is to look for any of these opportunities that's coming up from the organizations.
Yeah, so agree that graduate programs are a great stepping stone and entry point. And don't just look at graduate programs, look before that. So internship programs, or, many companies also run a lot of, it goes by different names, but essentially they are experiential programs where, it could be learning journeys, or it could be, company visits, or various such themes. I think these are great opportunities to get exposure, to understand more of what the industry is at, to network, and to, get really a sense of, the sort of opportunities and also conversely the challenges, right? And also for the companies that are interested in what do they value, what do they prioritize.
Thank you. And then we are ready for another challenging question. So the next challenging question, right? We have got two questions that are specifically on the topic of hiring mature workers. And so the question is, in the context of a hiring situation, would you be able to speak to, in having experience versus someone without that experience, but with open mind and eager to learn? So experience versus, I would say, hunger and learnability.
Okay, I'm quite curious about the question because it's almost like saying it's mutually exclusive. I don't think it is mutually exclusive.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, right, so we have answered the questions on mid-career switchers, and then let me see, have we adequately addressed everything? So I just have one last question before I invite both of you to share what, your parting tips to our career pivoting hopefuls. And the last question is, with so much focus on technology going forward, do you think AI will eventually replace the human asset managers? Meaning, do we really need only super programmers going forward?
I don't think so. And why? Because I think there is no replacement for creativity, for that understanding of nuances. And again, it's about, so we started this session by, kind of touching on insights versus knowledge. Now, I think super AI can help to draw insights, but in a sense, there also is that human input to that human intuition to direct super AI on which direction in order to draw those insights. So, well, at least my personal belief is that humans still have a place on this planet.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kai as well. And, even in our roles as talent acquisition, right? Sometimes you wonder whether robots will take over our role in screening CVs. But no, I don't think so. You need a human being to know another human being. So I think that's very important. And our world is made out of many, like, Kai was saying, nuances and changes that can't be detected. So even in the world of asset management, you still need a human being to understand what's going on out there to be in order to configure that particular technology. So you still need that human touch. So I don't think that's going to be replaceable.
Thank you for that. Oh, I'm told that we actually have time for at least one more question. So, okay. Oh, just a personal question. Can we connect on LinkedIn with both of you?
Yeah, sure.
Of course.
Oh, that's not a question. So I'm told that we have permission for just one more question. So I'm going to look at this. And so much on technology. Considering how COVID-19 fallout is starting to be felt in the entire banking and finance sector, what are your views on the hiring and opportunity space in Singapore? And if you would like, specifically for both your respective companies.
I mean, I would say it's definitely still optimistic. I think for the fact that we have positions posted, I think that's a very good sign. I think we still look towards growing and the organization here in Singapore. So I would say yes, there will be opportunities that will come along throughout. May not necessarily be volumes, right, that we are used to, but it doesn't mean that there isn't any.
My response is very short. Yes, we are hiring.
Thank you for that. So we are ready to wrap up, and I'd like both of you to share what is your one piece of advice for people who are preparing themselves for a career change in this climate?
I think what I really want to share is really recognizing that, you know, what you have at this point can be relevant. It requires you to kind of go through your past experience and your past skill sets, your current skill sets, I mean, and competencies with a very fine-tooth comb and kind of frame it in a current context. What's transferable? What can be polished and updated to be more useful? Or what are some of the things that you may need to unlearn or relearn? And there's not an end state to it. It doesn't mean that, you know, once I've learned this, that's it. Because I personally believe that it's a continuous cycle. There will always be this continuous cycle of unlearning, learning, relearning, and we start all over again.
No, I agree with Kai as well. And I think what I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help, right? If you really need to bounce off your ideas with a career counselor, I mean, there's so many options right now available. Always seek for that, because sometimes an alternative view may help you think about things that you might not have thought about, and you might not have even think about, you know, doing. So always try to reach out for help and do not be afraid to do that.
Thank you very much, ladies. Really appreciate your spending your time with us. And right, I realize we don't have a raise hands function on this chat panel. So I you know, on behalf of the audience and on behalf of IBF, I'd like to, you know, offer a virtual applause for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for having me here too. It's a pleasure.
Have a wonderful rest of afternoon.
Thank you. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you.